the Auburn Finance Committee. Today is February 26, 2025. It is 5:30 p.m. Tonight's agenda, we just have our call to order. We're going to do a quick overview of the FY 2026 budget, review any potential votes. We do not have any transfers tonight, no minutes, so it should be a relatively brief meeting for us tonight. Let me just read our remote participation script. I don't see that we have anybody online, but we're still going to read this. This open meeting of the Town of Auburn Finance Committee is being conducted both in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed to participate remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For the public to join the meeting remotely by telephone, it's 1-786-535-3211 and an access code of 991-599-357. Or the public can join via computer at global.gotomeeting.com/join/991-599-357. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by Auburn Cable Television. If some or all of the Finance Committee members are remote, please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda participating remotely are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Michael Marshall.
Present.
Steve Consiglio.
Here.
And Andrew Shar.
Here.
Town officials, and I believe caller one, is that Trevor?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and Trevor Sansucci, I just called the roll. So Trevor is with us as well.
Here.
Thank you. Town officials and employees participating, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Interim Town Manager Dory Vecchio.
Here.
CFO Town Accountant Karen Harnoy.
Present.
And Administrative Assistant Sharon Kwiatkowski.
Here.
Also note that each vote taken in the meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Do we have anything to vote on? So it should be relatively quick. So before we go over the overview, first I just want to welcome, we have a new member of the Finance Committee this evening. Andrew Shar is with us. He was appointed by the Board of Selectmen on Monday evening, and he was sworn in today. Certainly we had 3 good candidates that applied, and so I want to thank everybody that came out and applied for the position, and welcome Andrew to our humble little committee here for Wednesday evenings.
Thank you.
You joined just in the middle of the busy season as we're regularly going through the budget and Wednesdays, and then we sort of taper off, so.
Perfect.
But welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to being a part of the committee.
So right into the overview. Who would like to conduct a quick overview of what our budget season's going to look like?
I will. So thank you for having us here this evening. I'm going to go over the FY26 budget presentation to the Finance Committee. So everyone has a copy of the presentation. Okay. Now we'll just start out with a summary. The first slide is the 2026 budget presentation, which kind of just shows everything at a high level. The appropriations at $86.182 million. The total revenue sources, 86.211, which leaves an excess of 29,196.68, or 0.03 of the budget. The excess levy capacity in this budget is still at 9.3 million, and the budget is utilizing the full extent of Prop 2.5. Okay, this again is kind of like an overview of the FY 2026. This will be the revenue and expenses. And what we'll do is we'll go through each category in a little bit more detail, give some highlights of some of the major factors in each of the budgets. We'll have in our revenues, we'll have local receipts, the cherry sheet receipts, tax levy, the debt exclusion, available funds, and then we'll go over the total, the detail of each departmental appropriation. So we'll start out with the fiscal year 26 tax levy. The base tax levy for fiscal 26 is $56.919 million. We increased that by 2.5%, which is $1.422 million. We add projected new growth at $1 million, which gives us our 2026 levy of $50,025,000. Our levy limit is 59.3, so we're still maintaining, like I mentioned, the 9.3 million of excess levy, and the percent of the levy limit that we're at is 84.30%. So again, this is just some of the highlights about the tax levy. I may have mentioned the utilization of the full 2.5, the adjusted new growth at $1 million. And fiscal '26 is a one-year reprieve on the 1/10 tax levy earmark for the 5-year CIP, and it's redirected towards the operating budget in this year. This budget, as recommended, maintains the current FY '25 levy, excess levy. Again, there was no consideration of going over the levy limit. Despite the use of 100% of the 2.5, taxation at status quo assessed value should be minimal given the retirement of the high school debt. And based on sales data, residential home values continue to increase, but at a slower pace. The next slide is a graph of the new growth that shows the 5-year average at 740,076, and in fiscal year '25, the actual new growth was 822,061. And the next category is the state aid coming from the cherry sheet. For fiscal '26, there's just a very moderate increase of 297,659, and we're using the governor's proposal. The 5-year average for the state aid is 772,570. So as you can see, we're below the average by about $475,000. The current year increase in fiscal '25 that we're currently in, the increase was $337,000, just to give you an idea of where we've been. And fiscal '24, that's the last time that it was substantial, was at $1,067,000. So all of this results in a greater dependency on local revenues and taxation to meet the budgetary needs. And we can expect the volatility in this state aid for the next several years, is what we anticipate. And then the next sheet is the cherry sheet history graph, which shows the increases that we've had. And actually, the 10-year average going back was 947,000. So we can see how we've come down significantly in '25 being the 337,000. And projected for '26 being 297. Okay. Next category of revenues are local receipts. The estimates are up 6.96% over '25, which is an increase of 885,924. The biggest parts of that are the interest income, which is up significantly due to the high returns on investment. That's up 300,000. So any downturn in the rates will result in a lower return on investment. Motor vehicle excise was increased by 339,500, and that was based upon our actual revenues from '24. The hotel motel was increased by 150,000, which is 20.7% in '26. And again, that was based upon the 2024 actual, which was over $1 million. So we did increase, but we didn't want to increase all the way up. I'm going to be a little conservative on that. So again, this may, because we're going a little bit higher in some of our estimations, this may result in a reduction of free cash due to estimates that are close to that. And the next page shows the local receipts in the various categories from 2023 to 2026, which is at 13.6 million. Okay, the next revenue category is the available funds. Now, the estimate is down 40.59%, which is 1.8 million. And the following items are make up the difference. The reduction is primarily made up of one-time use of free cash, 903,000. That was from the fall town meeting in '25, which included warrant articles such as OPEB, stabilization, CIP. The fiscal '26 budget recommends using 135,000 in free cash towards CIP. There was a $329,000 reduction in the use of the sewer retained earnings, a $490,000 reduction in the use of ambulance receipts. In fiscal '25, the budget provided for the cost of the purchase of an ambulance, whereas '26 does not. There was a reduction of $180,000 from Packagug retained earnings. That's the golf course, and there's no CIP request for '26. And a reduction of $40,000 from cable access retained earnings. Again, there's no CIP request for '26. There is a recommendation for a one-time use of $50,000 that was collected from Eastland Partner impact fees for public safety DDIS support costs. That's in the budget for '26. And the next slide shows the available funds, and it breaks it down between the sources for a total in 2026 of $2,672,000. Okay, in the budget, some FY '26 expenses, there's some staff that were requested but were not considered to be added to the budget. 2 firefighter paramedics, a DPW junior fleet mechanic, a GIS support position, and a parks laborer. Now, there were some recommended positions that are added in the '26 budget. There is 1 police patrol with a start date of 1/1, so that'll be half a year. 2 firefighter paramedics, start date 1/1, again, half a year. 1 assistant golf course superintendent that will be paid for out of the Golf Enterprise Fund. A resource librarian that was budgeted for 26 weeks, half a year. And there were 2 new school positions that were required by student IEPs, the individualized education programs, which is made up of 1 sped teacher at Swanson Road and a speech language pathologist that's district-wide. The 2026, just some items to point out under fixed costs. There is a recommendation in the budget for a sum of money that is in the salary wage reserve that is for union contracts to be negotiated. And this budget meets contractual obligations for the school contracts, which have been settled. It adds $35,000 to DPW fleet to meet cost escalation for vehicle supplies. It increases fire overtime by $165,000. The Bay Path assessment is up 4.28%, or $74,167. The enrollment remains unchanged at 131 students. Norfolk Aggie was budgeted with estimated increases for tuition and transportation, and we were just notified the other day that a new student has applied for the next school year, so those costs may increase from what is presented in this budget. And the FY '26 budget also meets the solid waste collection and disposal costs. Under employee benefits, some items to note: pension and benefits is up 6.79%, which is $993,000. The Worcester Regional Retirement Assessment is up 11.7%, $605,916. And that accounts for a discount of $99,104 if paid by 7/1 of '25, and we always take advantage of that. The group health insurance is estimated to be in the vicinity of 5% increase. The town is considering mitigating portion of the premium increase by offering premium holidays and leveraging the trust equity of approximately $11 million to help to offset the increase. When it comes to discretionary spending, the town operating budgets are very lean. There is not much in the way of discretionary line items, but we do continue to address professional development and certifications to advance our employees for succession planning. There was just a couple of other notable items. The union wages are level funded for FY '26 using '25 rates. But as I mentioned under the fixed costs, a sum of money is being recommended in the salary reserve for union contracts to be negotiated. So that is considered in this budget. The FY '25 appropriation Okay, was another thing I just wanted to point out too. The FY25 appropriation on the departmental budget sheets, which is in your budget book, they reflect the town meeting votes. Not included are finance committee transfers and the 1% non-union salary increases based upon performance reviews. Just want to make sure that when you look at it, if it looks like something's increasing 3%, it's because it doesn't include that 1% that was transferred in by the finance committee. And just another note on highway and fleet, some employees were moved from highway and sewer to create the new fleet division. The next couple of pages are the departmental budgets that have the totals by department. There's a few articles that are listed there. The total annual appropriations of $86.182 million. So to summarize, for FY '26 budget, revenues, $86,211,275.83, expenses at $86,182,079.15, with the unobligated balance at $29,196.68, and we're happy to report that this is a balanced budget. So we'd be happy to take any questions that you might have. I know that's a lot of information, and you just received the presentation, but feel free to ask anything.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions? And I just more for our newest member, please ask questions. I mean, when I started at that end of the table, and I still ask questions, I'm not a finance person. If there's acronyms that are thrown about or funds that you're not aware of, just ask, because I guarantee if you asking, someone else up here probably also would want to ask the same question. And I can assure you that, a lot of the questions that we ask, even if we know the answers already, it's to benefit the taxpayers at home that are watching, that we're asking these questions and sort of helping to explain some of these things. So I certainly, throughout this process, I encourage asking as many questions as you want. Don't hesitate to, or think, you're the new person and therefore you have to sit there and be quiet. I encourage you to ask questions throughout the process.
Perfect.
But anybody, I'll throw it out, this is sort of our opening night, but
I guess I had a couple of questions. Because this is a union contract year. Can you refresh my memory? Are those like 3-year contracts or 5-year contracts or what?
Through the chair, yes, they are. They're 3-year
3
contracts.
years? That's what I thought.
We're negotiating all of them right now.
So in the future, the budget, because it seems to me that there are two different, there's the union contracts with the, increased triggers. It's the non-union with, training and those triggers. But I'm wondering if when we do the budgeting, the big picture when we're doing the budgeting, are those sort of like, is that money like in there already as a placeholder, or is that when we're doing all the transfers to sort of cover? Because we do a lot of transfers specifically to cover wages that technically I thought that would have been in the budget prior.
So through the chair, this year, there will be a lot of transfers because right now, any union negotiation, once that's settled, our union negotiations, will move that money from the reserve account into each individual budget. But typically, actually annually, every year, 1% of bylaw employees have funds in the reserve account as well. And they only get those after a review. And if it's a positive review, they get that 1%. So you'll see different transfers throughout the year. This year, I guarantee you, there'll be a lot more as these union contracts settle.
But they will come from the reserve account that's already sort of holding that placeholder? Is that correct? Is that
correct.
my understanding the
Yes, you
mechanics
are.
there?
Yes, it's a placeholder for, we don't know what it's going to be, so we couldn't actually add it to the individual budgets.
Gotcha, okay. And my other question is on other notable items, it said highway and fleet employees were moved from highway and sewer to create a new fleet division. And so I'm wondering, what is the new fleet division? And is that within something that already exists, or is that something new?
That's a great question. Through the chair, we've been working with our sewer and highway unions for the past couple years since I first started to move a few people that were mechanics in each division. So they did the same job, and they were in different unions. We had 2 people in the sewer union, 2 people in the highway union, getting different rates of pay and different benefits, doing the same job. And it was difficult to manage, number one, track, number two, and we decided to work with the unions to move them into one fleet group. The group was able to determine who their, what union they wanted to go to. And they chose the laborers, which is currently our highway union. It is a separate group, though. So I'm going to be meeting them in the next few weeks. I'm not sure if we're going to add them onto the highway union or if we're going to do a separate contract for them. But we now have all of our fleet maintenance, our mechanics in one union with the same rate of pay, with the same level of benefits, which is much easier to manage and to deal with.
Sense, and that includes fire department, I assume, as well?
Yes, it does.
I'm good.
Just to point it out, it's under DPW, and so DPW is broken out into like a bunch of different divisions, and there's just I think it's on like the 3rd page of the DPW budget, you'll see fleet maintenance,
Okay.
just as an FYI.
Trevor, I know you don't have the documents probably in front of you this evening, but do you have any general questions relative to?
No, not at the moment. I think everything was laid out really well. I'm questions more to come when we're looking at the individual departments, but I'm good for now.
Thank you.
I guess I do have one more general question, because since a lot of the new receipts is based on new growth, and there's all this clamoring in the background about 40B, and it seems to me that 40B is also driving those new receipts to some degree. And I'm wondering, I don't know if the right question is politically or financially, but how do these two things play out between, like people's complaints that if we do 40B, we're going to increase the cost of schools and this and the other thing. And at the same time, it's the 40B that's keeping the tax rate lower because we've got $1 million from new arrivals. And so I was just wondering what your perspective is on this, I guess, is.
So it's a really good point through the chair. I think the issue with the 40Bs that make it really difficult for our community to accept is that they are able to bypass a lot of our bylaws by coming into town. And that makes it difficult for people to understand why are they allowed to do this. There's a state law, 40B. The developers only have to abide by the state law, and our town bylaws protect our town and our residents and our neighborhoods. They don't have to necessarily follow any of those bylaws. That's why they go through the process. We do need housing in Auburn. We have a housing production plan. We have a strategic plan. It's hard for administration, it's hard for boards, committee members, and residents of town to deal with when someone just wants to put it in their neighborhood without following all the laws that anyone else would have to follow if it wasn't a 40B. So I think that's where the contention is. But you do raise a good point. I know Eastland Partners right now, they're opening up a building about every 6 weeks. And when they do that, as part of the agreement, we do get a check from them every 6 weeks right now as they're opening each of their buildings. And once they're all done, they're all going to be in the tax rolls, so you'll see that growth. And you're going to see it with the other ones as well. But it's just, I think it all goes together, but the reason why there's animosity and uncertainty and people are upset is because, developers are looking to build huge buildings, apartment buildings in our neighborhoods that we wouldn't necessarily want there, but we have to work within the law and do the best that we can to protect our residents.
Are there any two, a lot of the state's obviously getting a lot of pushback. And my understanding is if somebody's sitting on 15 acres. They could sit on it for quite a while, generations, and there's no way to push them to develop it. And then when they do decide to develop it, you know, they'll sell it to the highest bidder. And is there, like, it seems to me, because I remember there was the post farm, post land, I forget what it was. And somehow we had the right of first refusal on that land. And the town wisely purchased that land so we could decide what gets built on it rather than a developer. I'm wondering if, I don't know, maybe can we write a bylaw that says that we have the right of first purchase before you sell an empty lot or something like that? I mean, I guess the 40B would sort of go around it automatically, but we would then be in a better position to actually drive the development rather than being a victim of it.
Through the chair, I understand what you're saying, and when the last 40B just came to our attention a few weeks ago, I did ask the assessor's office to give me a list of any large properties that are open in town. What can we anticipate? I can speak to our council on a bylaw like that. I'm not familiar on any type of control we may have over private property, but I am familiar with property that up near the golf course that the town did purchase to protect it from not necessarily a 40B, but just a regular, someone who's coming in to put in something that was undesirable in the town at that time. And that town is maintained, that land is maintained, and it's kept the integrity of that neighborhood. And it's something that we can use in the future for whatever we decide to use it for. When it comes to personal private property, we're very limited, I know, in what we can do, but I was thinking the same way you were. Is there anything we can do to gear these developers to where the housing production plan recognizes those areas where we can develop or we should develop? And there's a lot of conversation about that right now. But I can definitely run that by council to see if there's any type of bylaw that we can set forward to the town residents to see if we can have maybe a first right of refusal.
Or a separate stick is, you know, craft a different tax rate for hoarding, which is actually an old idea about land use, that you get taxed higher for not using the land than for using the land.
Oh, interesting.
And so, you know, it would be great if we had farms again, you know, like, but people like, you know, like drummer, like the Yankee drummer, like we couldn't buy it because we couldn't afford it, but at the same time, it's been sitting there for 15 years. Like, none of it makes sense. It doesn't make sense for the person sitting on it because it's really just an expense. But somehow we must be keeping the expense low enough that they don't mind paying taxes for 15 years. Well, maybe we could give them an incentive to sell or to develop or plant carrots, do something with it, you know?
I'll refer that to council.
I did one question. Can you just explain on the tax levy, the 1-year reprieve on the 1/10 tax levy earmark for 5-year CIP? Can you just explain that one to me, what that is?
So I believe that normally what would happen is 1/10 of the tax levy would be earmarked for capital. But in order to balance the budget for fiscal year '26, that money was redirected into the operating budget rather than towards the CIP budget.
So when we look at CIP, will we see items that were scheduled for 26 bumped out further? Is that how we managed to not have to use the 1/10 towards CIP?
I don't think so. I think it would probably be used by another funding source, either like bond proceeds, or we have a small amount of stabilization that we're using in there.
Additional questions?
The only question I have is on the new positions. I know that we have obviously spent a lot of time talking about the fire department and like the planning for what's a safe shift and everything like that. I'm just curious, and I know that you probably can't answer this question, and I'm not asking you to, but to sort of prepare the other departments when they come in, like what research they've done to sort of justify new positions. I'm thinking specifically of the police patrol position. I think that's probably the department that's in the most similar situation to fire. And with the fire department, they come in consistently with like, this is the number of calls we've responded to. This is XYZ. And I would be very interested to see similar data from the police department. So anything we can do to get that information would be helpful to me.
The chair, absolutely. And when we met with them to discuss their budget, originally, that's what we had asked for as well. There needs to be some sort of an explanation, especially if you're hiring staff, because it's not just the cost of that employee. You've got benefits and whatnot. So I'm confident that if there's a position on here, which there are a couple, that there is a very good explanation why. And I agree, they should be able to explain that to you.
Yeah, I would concur with Mr. Marshall. I think this year of any year that we've done finance, it's going to be a tight year. And I think those department heads have to justify to the taxpayers at these forums to every penny that's on there. And I know behind the scenes, when you've met with the department heads and Karen's met with the department heads, I know you're doing a lot of that. I know a lot of the asks that they make, you're trimming away long before it gets to us. And certainly we appreciate that. And we know you put a lot of hard work into it. But I think the public needs to hear maybe some of the, we asked for X, Y, and Z, and town management only gave us X this year, or nothing, because it just wasn't the year to be asking. I think on each one of these, we really need to, this year in particular, get some data behind it and really some detailed explanations on ones that we probably would every other year just say, okay, it looks good. Let's move forward. I did have a question relative to, you mentioned not reflected were transfers. I'm not finding it now, but yeah, on the other notable items. So not included are finance committee transfers and the 1% non-union. Did you mean the transfers that we would have done over the course of the year would not be reflected? Because some departments had some significant transfers. How are we going to know the year to year on those?
So that is a really good point. And Karen and I were meeting the other day and realized that some of the percentages didn't make any sense. So we had called that in and, we follow the process that's always been done. I think Karen and I have decided for next year that we're going to add a column that actually says what the 25 or whatever the year 26 appropriation is, and then also a column for the transfers into that department so that you can actually see so the percentages make sense. I know a lot of people here may understand which transfers went through, but the people that are listening outside here don't know that. And we were trying to figure it out ourselves because some of the percentages don't make complete sense, but all the 1% for any not bylaw employee that had a review and got that 1%, that's not in there. So if it looks like someone has 4 or 5% increase, that's most likely not the case. It's because of that transfer in. And I do know in other departments, there were a lot of transfers. I was here for some of them. They're not in there.
I mean, I know the one that's probably going to jump out us is going to be the fire department overtime. And I know
Absolutely.
Yeah.
the fire chief explained very well at the selectmen's meeting the other night and asked for additional monies for this year's budget, and we'll see that. But it's going to look like there's a big percentage jump between the 2 years, when in reality was what was allotted for 25, add the transfers, and the actual amount spent for 25 was a lot more than what was budgeted for 25.
The good news about it is it does show actuals for 24. So you'll see that there were high, and then you'll see a low budgeted number for 25. And so you can sort of make out that, but still, it's just not enough information to explain what the actual percentages are. So we'll be working on that for next year.
Yeah, I'll just read it. I know that that's been an issue every year with like.
Really?
Yeah. So I believe the way that the sort of layout is, it's like 24 budgeted, 24 actual, 25 budgeted, but because 25 hasn't closed yet, we never have 25 actuals, and then 26 budgeted, and that's usually broken out into department requests, town manager approved, and then whatever we approve. And so I think the idea of adding transfers in is a great idea. I would also be very curious about transfers out. I know every
Definitely.
year, like if we could just have a full delta
Yeah,
column.
yeah.
This is what changed. 'Cause
Yeah.
I will also say, I know that there are accounts, and I will not mention the department that I'm thinking of, but I know that it happens, is that there have been accounts that have, I think, been budgeted for a long time at a certain level, but are almost always every year used as like a piggy bank to hit everything else that they need to be hit. So I know I would personally be very, very curious to know about
Yeah,
transfers out
absolutely.
as well. Just,
Yeah.
if something's not being used over and over again, we shouldn't be budgeting it. So.
Right, and it needs to make sense. You need to be able to go across and have the percentage. You be able to look at it and say, oh, that makes sense, that 25 was this, we transferred in or out this is this year's request, and this is the percentage. Right now, you'll see that some of them, not all of them, but some of them are off when it comes to the personal employees.
Through the chair. The other thing I can do too is when we're reviewing the departmental budgets, I can have a printout here of like the 25 budget. So I can make some highlights to you as to if certain budget line items were increased or decreased, if that's helpful, at least for now,
Yeah, that would be
fill
great
in the
if
gap.
you can have some data relative to the transfers
Sure.
for those
Yep.
departments. That would be beneficial to explain those anomalies, apparent anomalies. The data is there, just on the spreadsheets we're looking at, isn't always clear. Anybody else, any questions relative to the presentation? Andy?
Just a couple. Utilization, Proposition 2.5, I'm not aware of what that is. If someone could explain that to me, please.
So on the tax levy, the town is only allowed to increase by 2.5% over the prior year. So we can do 2.5%, and then we can add in new growth. And then we come to our levy limit.
Fair enough.
It's essentially a cap on what the
Cap
town's
it.
allowed to tax. And as Steve will, I'm sure, point out at some point, sometimes the tax on, like, the actual tax increase is higher than 2.5%, but that's based on new growth. So like, the rate can increase by more than 2.5%, even if the overall tax base increases because of either new buildings or increased values or whatever else. So it is a little confusing, and it took me until like this year to figure out what it all meant, but yeah, it's a great question.
Fair enough. Thank you.
I'm going to ask for him, because I'm always fuzzy on excess levy as a percentage of capacity in dollars. Because I'm not going to bother embarrassing myself by saying what I think what it means. I'm going to let you re-explain it to me, because I think I'm wrong.
Do you want me to?
Okay.
So happened once I got here, prior to me getting here, when the budget was produced by the town manager, it was submitted, and they never went up to that 2.5%. I guess 15 years' worth of budgets didn't reach that 2.5% that were allowed to go up. And what that is each year you'd take that, and it's almost like a bank. It's like a bank that we can use. The problem is you can use it, but when you use it, you tax the residents. So they weren't taxed then, we could still use it, but you have to remember, we're taxing 2.5 this year. If we tap that unused tax levy, which we can, which it's not recommended in this budget, our residents get taxed even more. So it's just the money that we did not use in prior years. I believe it was about 15 years. Don't mark my words on that, but that's what Ed had discussed, that they didn't have to. They had different revenue sources. Expenses were lower. It was pre-COVID. The financial outlook for the town was a little bit better. Not that it's bad now. It's just they were able to not use the full 2.5%. There's other towns that do similar.
So that is sort of how I understood it. But part of my head explodes, because what you're really saying is we're at 2.5%. But if we wanted to, we could go to 12%, because or whatever it is, 9 plus 2, 11%. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we've got, what you're saying is, it's sort of like the national deficit. We're all under taxed $34 trillion, if you believe that, right? And you're saying, well, the town didn't collect $9.3 million.
Right.
But that money is not in the town budget. That money is everybody's pockets.
The only thing I'll say, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that essentially there's like $9.3 million that we could tax, like town administration and the select board could decide to tax without needing to do an override. So like we are allowed on an annual basis to increase our taxes by 2.5%. And that goes up every year regardless of what you actually do. There's like a cap, it's like a salary cap, it's a tax cap. And we're whatever $9.3 million underneath it. And Ed always rightfully points out that like over the course of the time that he's been here, I think we saved taxpayers like something like 50 or 60 million dollars in taxes in town. But essentially, like if we were to ever have a budget crisis, there's $9 million, at least for fiscal year 2026, that the town administration and the select board could choose to tax without needing to go to the taxpayers and ask them for permission.
And pretend that it's under 2.5.
And it's not that it's under, it is under.
It's not under,
Yeah.
it's not 2.5% this year.
The cap
It's under 2.5.
doesn't end at the end of the fiscal year. So it's essentially a cap on the total amount we're allowed to tax and not a cap on,
I mean,
like, year to year, you can only.
But I'm
increase
just
by
thinking like in 100 years, this could be like, $2 trillion or something. Like it just,
hope
at
it
some
is.
point, it would make no sense. And I don't understand why if you have a law that says you can't go up 2.5% a year.
So it doesn't
just
accumulate.
extinguish.
It doesn't accumulate. So the 9.3 is the total difference between like whatever the tax rate was when Prop 2.5 went in place and now. But the actual savings is like $60 million.
Yeah.
It's not like we could tax the full save. We couldn't go back and say, hey, we didn't tax you in 2015, so we're coming for those taxes.
Right, but that's
We're
what it
just
sounds
allowed to
like.
increase the rate in the new year. So like the savings to the town we've already saved $60 million. They could increase the taxes this year by that 9 million, essentially to like cover a gap in budget. And it's, again, because 2.5 is a cap on the highest amount you're allowed to tax. And it keeps going up regardless of whether you go to 2.5 or whether you only go to 1.5. It makes sense, Steve.
Okay, I'll take
And it's also not something that would be done without a lot of
I
conversation.
mean, it doesn't sound like it's politically palatable ever, but I'm always curious when I see it.
Yeah, it's
That
not,
sort of
I
environment
mean,
sense.
you'll see in our budget, there are some areas, one in particular is the school department, that you're going to see, my recommendation as town manager is lower than their request. That may result, the superintendent said it the other day, in a couple of layoffs. In those types of circumstances, this finance committee may come back to me and say, we can't do that. You have to you have to look at the numbers. So there's a lot of conversation that would be had, whether it's additional, like between now and then, the governor's budget comes out, maybe that's better, or, other revenue sources. Or if it's something that we do have to look at the unused tax levy, that would not be done in a silo, it would be done in open meeting.
And if we raised an extra 2 million this year, then that would go down to 7 million instead of being at 9. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So just trying to catch up on, so that is in theory kind of a safety net for the town, that we could increase taxes if some calamity happened, I assume? Is that kind of what it is? And
It could be through the chair, it could be perceived as that. We also have stabilization funds and free cash that we use for larger one-time purchases or to save taxpayer money and interest, which is what we're doing with the fire station. It's not something that we look at as something that we're actually going to tap. We hope we never have to. Because once you tap that, you're actually taxing our taxpayers more. And that's what we don't want to do. We do have some funds for free cash and stabilization, like I said, for emergencies. But if there is anything catastrophic, yeah, I'm sure there would be discussions regarding that unused tax levy.
so the town's position on that is, as we push that up, it's savings to the
Yes.
tax base, so
And we want to maintain that.
want to maintain it or
Yes.
grow it.
Yes.
I've never heard of that as a town of Auburn person, the savings, like Michael said, 60 million over however many years it's been. I mean, that would be good to publicize or get out there, and maybe I just haven't been paying attention, but that is a big deal in my mind. If that's 15 years of we've saved this much, you know, there should be some credit for that, I think, especially with, there's a lot of talk about, you know, the high taxes and the increases and all that. So just from someone who's never been in this realm yet, it would be good if we got that out more, I think, which could be hard, I guess, you know, but.
Yeah, I mean, I will say to that extent, I think Ed Kasnovich would, in his presentations to town meeting, which I saw that group of town meeting members, I think, are aware of the numbers, and I think those presentations are well received, and therefore why usually the warrant articles that are presented by town administration are usually favorable, voted upon favorably because of the fiscal responsibility that's been shown over the last X number of years. But I do agree, you know, as these discussions happen and, you know, the fire station project comes on, and, you know, we all, you know, tightening our expenses across the board, that those sort of reminders that, you know, town administration has been responsible with their decisions over the last, you know, several decades, so.
Doesn't hurt. Sure.
This category, I don't know what to call it, was created as part of the Prop 2.5% law. So that term wouldn't have existed the year prior.
I don't think so. I'm not sure what law was in effect prior to 2.5. Are you familiar?
It strikes me that it would have been a compromise of, well, what happens if the sky falls? And, okay, well, here's your emergency switch or something. Because that's what it sounds, that's kind of what it is. But anyway, kind of like GDP. GDP never existed until the Great Depression, you know? And then somebody said, what's going on? You know, how are we going to measure? And so I think that's kind of the same thing. What do we do with?
Trevor, do you have anything to add?
No, not right now. I appreciate the discussion.
Any thoughts on the order by which we start our meetings? And I think last year, I think it was at my request, we had asked for CIP to be done early on, as opposed to me, it did seem like it was always an afterthought. It was our last budget. We just sort of went through it quick, even though they're big dollar things. You know, defer to my fellow committee members, the order in which we want to look at these. A lot of it is scheduling, and we rely upon somebody who's not going to be scheduling much longer to,
For the dates that you have to do this work,
okay.
every Wednesday till April 9th.
So every Wednesday to April 9th. But as far as, you know, getting the department heads and their availability and the best practice for which ones take a lot of time and all that institutional knowledge that's about to walk out the door on us. But we'll.
Yeah. I do have our number.
But the committee, any thoughts on, you know, did you want to do CIP towards the beginning and then, you know, thoughts, discussions?
It was too much of a fire hose for me to analyze any of that yet.
Okay.
Maybe the second time I'd have a suggestion on how to improve it. The only thing I would request, though, is that the managers actually make a presentation of what's going on. And instead of just saying, well, I'm here, this is the number, ask me questions. I'd really like to see, you know, like, tell us what's going on in your department, because we don't really know to ask what questions to ask in a lot of cases. And obviously, they're living it every day. So one of the things that came out of that town finance committee things that I went to is setting up a liaison with every department with somebody on the board. I'm not sure how the mechanics work, how well people get along, but because, you know, you can only know if you only know by communicating, right? And everybody has got plenty of work to do. And if we don't do extra work, we can't know anything in reality. So they have to tell us. But it also makes it easier, I think. You know, the poor chief coming up and, you know, asking for the same thing over and over again. I think it would be nice, he would probably like to know he has an ally on the board that understands what he's going through because they've been closer to the thing, you know, it's in the school department. You know, I can't, you know, it's like you said, you watched the school department meeting the other day. So if you don't watch the meetings, you don't even have there's no way anybody's going to know. So I know that's extra work, which I'm sure they need like a hole in their head, but I think it would,
I do agree with you, Stephen. I don't know that the department heads really, if there's another forum by which they can communicate with the residents as to what their individual departments have done for the year and plan to do for the upcoming year and why they need the funds to do what they want to do. Some of them give very good presentations. Others, like Steve said, just sort of kind of rely on the numbers presented. And I don't know if there's another forum. I don't know that they ever get before the Board of Selectmen to tell their story. Town meeting, and after the Board of Selectmen, I don't think, meeting the other night, I don't think they could add anything more to an agenda. That was if we ever started going to 9:45, I'd have to think about my volunteer commitment for every Wednesday. But just your thoughts. I mean, they're answering to you as those department heads are, and
So through the chair, we do have department heads go in front of the Board of Selectmen every couple months. With me on, I am going to be doing things a little bit differently. I'm not sure if it'll be more often, but I can tell you there will be a change in the budget process. Like I said, Karen and I were just talking last week about just changes in this, but I think presentations are extremely important. I think goals and objectives for each department is extremely important. And also a document explaining for the people that can't see the presentation, what's going on in the department is important. So for next year, you'll see some changes. Hopefully I'll be in the position, you'll see some changes. But it is important to share the details of the department. So you're not wrong. A lot of people don't know what we do. And I did just hire someone for my office. The title is staff assistant, and I changed it to staff assistant communications coordinator so that we have someone that is fluent in social media and communications and can start sharing information about what this town does. No one knows what Sharon does. No one knows what's in Sharon, like everything that she has done and the deadlines that she has to remember every single week, day in and day out. Those types of things, I want to start getting out a little bit more. And it's not just Sharon, it's all of our town employees that work really hard that I think is important for them to share what they do. And it's important for residents to know, like, you know, when a pothole gets fixed, why, how, what, you know, why the trash, when it doesn't get picked up, what's going on, what are the issues? Because just, you know, like you said, some people just don't pay attention. But there are ways to get to our residents. Sometimes it's social media, sometimes it's TV, sometimes it's in writing. But we need to improve on that. So I have plans to do that, but I agree with you 100%.
And if it can't be completely done because we're about to roll into it, I would ask, you know, even for a dry run, kind of give the department heads a little bit that we're
Absolutely.
going to ask some questions. And it may be just selling their own department, you know, how many acres of fields were mowed for the DPW? How many miles of roadway? How many inspections permits were given out by, you know, DDIS? You know, all those little numbers. The library, how many visitors have come in? How many programs have they done? Like, they've got to sort of sell themselves as to, you know, what the needs are and
Absolutely.
what these monetary numbers mean to providing that level of service. I think we've said that recently, like, if the residents are enjoying a certain level of service that I hope they enjoy. Hopefully they're, you know, contacting you if they're not enjoying their level of services. I'm sure they are.
They are?
But, you know, we can certainly, you know, make some cuts, but that's going to impact those services they're currently using.
Absolutely.
So I think the department heads need to put on their best sales hats and come up and tell us a little bit of a story.
Pull something together.
many years ago, I did the Citizens Leadership Academy. And so they are very good presenters, but, you know, they certainly know what's going on in their house. And I thought it was really good. But, you know, the sad part, of course, is, you know, 14,000 other people probably would have enjoyed it as well. And, you know, and it's like you said, it's all about communication. But, you know, maybe when you get that far, have a web page with each department with the video and
Absolutely.
give 10 minutes to talk about what they do, you know?
Exactly.
If I could, through the chair, what I'll do is I will communicate to the departments too, to provide, when we start, not to just kind of come up here and say, okay, well, do you have any questions on my budget? To kind of give a little bit of an overview for each department this year. We'll try the best that we can to. Okay.
The enemy.
Yes.
We're not the enemy.
No, we want to support us.
I know you're not.
So, it's, you know,
We want to support them but, you know, we also have to answer to the folks at home and the taxpayers that we're doing that due diligence, so they need to, you know, tell us what they need and why they need it.
Very fair.
March 5th is our next meeting. What do you think we should jump into? Who do you think would be scheduled for the first? Do you want to?
Normally we'll send an email out to departments asking if they have what their availability is. I know that I've talked to Beth Chamberlain already. There's a week in March she cannot come, so.
And those, I think usually when you schedule, those are the bigger ones, right? The schools to try and get them coordinated.
With Bay Path sometimes.
Bay Path,
Yeah.
sometimes we've done an all
Police,
education night,
fire,
so.
and together usually. Well, public safety, you know. Well, yeah,
It's actually not too.
it's not too bad, no.
Some of the other ones actually that have multiple divisions can be even.
DPWs. and-
DPWs,
DPW.
you wouldn't think it would be as long as it is, but all the
there's
stuff
a
that
lot.
falls under them, yeah.
So we can send an email out and see
Okay.
who starts responding, and definitely we'll get somebody for next week.
Okay.
So we have a meeting every Wednesday through the beginning of April? Correct. Okay. So I make sure I pencil it all in.
Also,
April 9th, you have to.
April
be
9th,
done.
we have to be done because we have to deliver.
Move it up. Gotcha, yeah.
and we'll also likely have a meeting typically right before town meeting
Gotcha.
to do any final approvals that we need to do.
Right.
And then you'll obviously be invited to stay for town meeting.
Sure. Great.
I do have one more question, probably for Karen, but maybe not. The premium holiday for the health insurance. So what is the mechanics of that? And what is the logic of doing that?
So what would happen, there's approximately $11 million that's built up in the health trust. So at some point, we do want to give some funds back to those that are contributing. So what we'll do is we'll just turn off the deduction for that week or that biweekly for the school, whatever it is. And then the employees will not have their share withheld.
But isn't that 11 million, whatever the number is, isn't that also like part of OPEB? No.
No, so through the chair, we're self-insured, so we don't work with necessarily, like, we don't pay insurance premiums. We actually pay for actual costs of our health insurance. And it's fluid. Some years are really difficult, some years are better. Our trust fund, much like our unused tax levy, is very healthy. So when we have employees that contribute every week to their health insurance, when it gets to a point, we like to give it back to them. So basically, they'll be premium-free for usually 2 weeks a year that I've seen it, 2 different weeks. And it gives the employee back some money that they've already paid into it. And it still allows us to pay all of our premiums and all of the, not premiums, all of the costs associated with our health insurance.
Do you pay them back or do you just not deduct it that week?
We don't pay, yeah, we don't pay it back. We don't deduct it.
Just don't?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
And-
Thank you.
And who administers the health insurance? How does that get done? Should I-
That is done through my office and also with the Human Resource Coordinator. So we have a company that I work with, that Auburn works with, and I've worked with in my previous lives, Gallagher Associates, they changed names. And they are our consultant for health insurance. They go out to bid for us. They do all of our projections for us. They are the ones that actually get our claims data, because we cannot get that because of HIPAA. They get our claims data. Even what they get is sort of, is protected through HIPAA to determine what our actual costs are. We use Blue Cross. We have different providers for health insurance, so they actually work with those providers for us as well. So it's a pretty detailed process. We do get quotes every year. We try to get the best insurance possible for our employees at the least cost, but the number increase is usually double digits a year. We don't anticipate that this year. We'll probably use some of our trust fund money to keep that down a little bit lower for our employees this year. But it's an active account that we watch and monitor very, very closely.
So they contract with Blue Cross to do all the administrative parts, but they're doing sort of the negotiating.
We contract with Blue Cross. So our consultant works for us. They go out to bid for us. So they work with the providers, and then they come back to us and say, Blue Cross is going to charge you this and this in administrative fees, and they can provide, these are your co-pays, these, we can work out plan design and whatnot, which typically we don't change much, but to try to get to a cost that makes sense for our employees and for the town. So it's us contracting with the healthcare insurance, like Blue Cross and the insurance companies, but the consultant does a lot of work for us. There's expertise that's far beyond. I've been in human resources for 15 years, and it's far beyond my,
Self-insured is,
yes,
it's not a simple thing, although
yes.
I
And
think
there's,
you save a ton of money.
yes, and there's reinsurance for our high claimants. We do have a couple in town that reach certain limits, whether it's their dependent or themselves, that our reinsurance does kick in, and that protects us from going into our trust.
Can I just follow up on that? So because we're a self-insured company where I work, and most companies I've worked for are, why do you think that you're not going to have a double-digit increase going forward? Because that's been, again, to your point, the status quo for many years now. Is there a reason for that? Is there people that have left? Or?
That's a good question. We will.
Yep.
And we'll probably subsidize a portion of that through our health trust because it is the size that it is right now. We won't always be able to do that, but we've been doing it for several years now.
Because of those, yeah, okay.
And it all depends on how our claims come in. And it's a great benefit for our employees when we can't necessarily give them some of the wages that our private companies can pay. We at least can help out a little bit on the insurance side of it.
Thank you.
Is that considered an enterprise fund?
It is not.
Okay. Anything else? I think we're lined up. Next meeting for March 5th, we'll get once the department heads get back to us, we'll have an agenda ready to go. Just one additional item tonight. So you probably saw on the signboard out front, there's two retirees that are retiring. Sue Strozina, that is behind the scenes as well. In my experience, the people behind the scenes are the ones that make operations run. For our case,
Michael,
Sharon Kwiatkowski has been the,
thank you.
I'll take a hug in a minute.
Okay.
Has certainly been the person behind the scenes for this committee and for a long, long time, almost 40 years,
30-something.
30-something years, we'll leave it at that, for the town of Auburn, working in town administration in a variety of roles, but certainly congratulations to you. Thank you for all your efforts and support of this committee.
Pleasure working.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Humongous shoes to fill. So hopefully we've got a good person lined up.
Yeah,
We're gonna miss you tremendously.
you can come visit me.
The building will certainly shake
Yeah.
the day you walk out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon, for everything and all, really, I tremble when I see Sharon's not here or she's, this evening, I'm like, where's Sharon? Because she is the calming, whispering in this ear. I got Michael whispering on this ear, hey, you got to do this. And I got Sharon over this side, you can't know that's got to be this. So thankfully, Michael will still be here.
Correcting me when I'm wrong.
But a ton of institutional knowledge leaving us this evening. This is your last official meeting of,
Yeah.
You have the selectmen on Monday, and you've got us tonight, as you saved the best for
Yep.
last.
Yep, I did. And it's not 10 o'clock.
And it's not 10 o'clock, and we'll be done.
Good. Yay.
Anything else you want to add to Sharon's departure? I mean,
You cannot replace someone like Sharon or Sue. We have great people that will be able to do some of what you do, but we cannot take what's in your mind. And I am so grateful personally that you have agreed to stay on part-time to help us through the growing pains, but know that you'll be missed beyond, whether it's just finance or Board of Selectmen, it'll be everyone. You're just a staple in our community, and you've done such good work for us that I can't thank you enough. Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you, I appreciate your words. I've enjoyed working with the Finance Committee. Over the years, we've had a lot of great volunteers, and I've learned a lot. Now I understand a lot about municipal finance I probably wouldn't know, but thank you, and I appreciate the gesture.
thank you.
So I think she deserves it.
You have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. And before, Sharon? You have to hit the gavel for your last meeting.
Great, we are adjourned.
Yeah.